Somebody has some question or
No,
comment?
it's pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Oh, okay, perfect. Very cool. Okay. Um,
Professor, I actually have a question. Um, for the individual project, since myself, I'm picking the ISACA framework. Do we purchase that specific Excel sheet, or do you provide it for us?
are you talking about individual audit project or group project?
Individual.
The individual, everybody gonna be doing it using the IAM, right? It's gonna do it on the generative AI. So the generative AI, sure you can download the AI program from ISACA website, or you can just like use the sample audit program that I posted on Canvas.
Okay, sounds
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Very good question. And then I think that I don't know if you guys have a chance to look at chapter 2. So inside chapter 2, I think last week we went through the some of the background information about Cal Poly Pomona and also the link where you can go find the both the AI policy and also the information security policy standard, things like that. I don't know if anyone have any question when you go to that website. And yeah, if I can answer any question for you. No, pretty straightforward too.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And then again, both the individual and the group project score rating scale. I have posted uh, on in Canvas as well. So for the individual presentation, prepare for about 10 to 15 minutes, no more than 15 minutes, okay? Around 10 minutes is fine. So do about 10 minutes presentation, and then for the group presentation, plan for about 45 minutes. Because each group has about 6 people, and everybody should have an opportunity to speak. So I leave it to you guys how you're going to arrange it within your group, but the whole group will get 1 grade. And one person within a group can submit the deliverable. So no need to have everybody submit the group deliverable. One person from each group can be the one who just submitted. Okay, and everybody in a group will get the same rating. Okay. Let me see if, uh, okay. So while we're waiting for Steve, tonight, after the guest speaker, we're gonna go through quickly, chapter 6. So chapter 6 will focus on scope. So here we kind of go through some of the example on the scope. So when you conduct the audit, of course, first thing to do is like scoping. What do we audit? What scope we need to be auditing? So making sure that defining the scope is very important because you want to make sure that you don't over scope, because then you will not be able to finish your audit, and you want to make sure that the scope is comprehensive enough, like cover enough of the control so that you can draw a good conclusion out of it. So we can go through a little bit about scope, how to define scope based on different type of audit. And then after that, we're gonna go into like governance. So here we're gonna talk about, the different type of governance structure, the framework, talk about the tactic versus strategic versus logistic. So here we're kind of like going to a little bit about IT governance and why IT governance is formed. And then the next chapter, of course, is very important. Talk about how to communicate to the suite. So here is talk about how do we sell, how do we summarize the finding, how do we deliver the audit report audit rating? How do we make sure that the board level, senior management level understand the risks? How do they understand that, the implication or criticality of the finding and the remediation plan? So it's all around how do we communicate to the executive management to get their support buy-in. And next week, we're gonna have the the internal audit executive from Irvine Company. He graduated from this program as well, so he will be able to share with you guys a lot more about how he delivered the audit result to the board level management, okay? To the board and to management. So here, talking to the how to talk to this executive management, board levels executive, and then after that, we're gonna talk about, well, when you conduct the audit, how do you talk to the tech, right? Because sometimes when you conduct the audit, auditor might not be like expert in the technical stuff, but you should know enough about the high level information for you to be able to ask the right question and gather the right control and testing the control. So here we're gonna kind of go into a little bit more about like how do you ask those technical questions to make sure that you ask the right question, but not, not get intimidated by too in-depth of the technical terminology. So after, how to form your question when you communicate to the technical IT people, then it's like, how do you talk to the end user, right? The end user is the one who actually use the system, right? So they are the business process owner. So how do we talk to the user to make sure that they understand, why we're doing the audit and how can they leverage audit to help them to improve their control environment. So talking to the users, okay? Is Steven here yet? Yeah, somebody asking, is there a link to the AI policy? So the answer is yes. It's in the link that you have to go to the Cal Poly policy and procedure website, and in there's a AI policy. So the link to the Cal Poly Pomona policy and standard is included in the chapter 2 handout, the chapter 2 material. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Professor.
Okay, cool. Somebody just posted. Thank you. Okay. You guys see Steven yet?
No, I do not.
No.
Okay. So a couple more minutes. Yeah, this is the best place for you guys to ask questions, seriously. So think about like how often you have an opportunity to ask somebody who their career is in business continuity, disaster recovery space. So ask question, it might be an area that it will be, you will be interested to explore or kind of get involved in the long term. But ask the question so like it kind of help you support your decision. Oh, there he is. Hey, Steve. How are you, Steven?
Good. How about you, Amanda?
Good, 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 good. So, again, thank you so much for joining, Steve.
Of course.
So I told the student like, you have a very interesting background And obviously a lot of people probably wouldn't know, yeah, how can we get into doing more BCDR? How do we get into this space? What type of skill do we need? And you have a lot of experience and a lot of interesting background. So I'd like you to kind of introduce yourself a little bit and share with the class a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. It's a pleasure to be with this class. I participated as a guest lecturer last year and really enjoy talking to everyone. As Amanda mentioned, I am currently working at East West Bank as a vice president for business continuity. Uh, our business continuity program oversees the entire enterprise-wide resiliency program, which will cover disaster recovery, which will be a focus of my talk today. This also includes crisis management. So everything uh, ranging from IT outages, we get those a lot, to branch operation impacts, to big wildfires, earthquakes, anything that can essentially disrupt business operations, our team will manage that. So I've been with the bank for about 4.5 years already. It's flown by. Prior to East West Bank, I was with the Federal Reserve Bank system in San Francisco. Uh, San Francisco is the headquarters for the nation's cash supply. So all the policies surrounding currency, banknotes, as well as coin, is actually operated out of San Francisco, contrary to the belief that it may be in Washington. The Federal Reserve Bank system, different products. They have checks, check processing, they have wires, cash being one of the Federal Reserve's core products. It's the only uh, uh, kind of vendor, I guess, for a United States currency. So I was with the Fed for 5 years doing business continuity. So essentially, coming up with strategies to ensure that there would not be a disruption to the United States currency supply. So, an example of what I used to do at the Fed was to partner with the largest banks in the country to figure out ways where we can minimize the disruption of natural disasters. So, when you have a hurricane or earthquake disrupting a region, how do we get cash out to the American public? But also internationally, the US dollar is still the most important currency all over the world. Lots of geopolitical developments, but it remains a product that in an international market people gravitate towards. So to that end, in terms of business continuity, the United States actually maintains five business continuity facilities around the world where we store cash in case of an emergency where people need the cash because we can't. Flights may be disrupted, but every single day there are millions of dollars going out internationally. So that's how I got into business continuity. Prior to that, I worked for the University of California doing finance, and I also had a stint doing government relations. So quite a broad background, but uh, business continuity brings together all aspect of uh, any company because you really need to know the business. Um, Amanda, I do have some slides to share. I
Okay.
know. Let me kind of share that
Yep.
visual. So let me.
Let me make sure you can allow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I should have sent it to you beforehand.
No, it's okay. Let me stop sharing.
Mhm. Let's see if this will work. Let me know if you're able to see.
Okay. Yeah, we can
Yes,
see
we
it now.
can see.
All right, great. I'm gonna go. I have some slides, but I'll go through quickly because I know it's best to have sort of a conversation with this group. As I mentioned, business continuity management. uh, from the perspective of IT auditing, uh, regardless of how your company describes the program, it's always BCM. So I know our department, whenever we get our audit reports, it's always BCM. It doesn't matter what fancy names you have as a department. I work at Facebook. It used to be called Global Security and Resiliency. So every department, I mean, every organization will call it a little bit differently, but they essentially, for the most part, is comprised of four pillars. Business continuity, really focus on the business side of things, coming up with different strategies and workaround on how you can resume business when there is a disruption. Disaster recovery is the second big pillar. Sometimes you will see this pillar in reporting up to IT and separate from the business continuity program. But this is really focused on technology. So anything technology related, systems, applications, infrastructure, data center, uh, anything that touches that will fall under disaster recovery. Part of the program is to ensure that you have documented recovery strategies for technology, but also a very robust testing program. So you can stress test all the teams involved because you have to practice. You have to do these practice runs prior to a real event so you can identify issues and address them. The last two, crisis management, these are ad hoc. So crisis management is whenever there is a fire, literally and figuratively, where you have to drop everything and respond. So some notable events in recent years, obviously the LA wildfires just about a year ago, where most company enacted their crisis management teams. I know I was running a number of calls with our senior executives uh, and broad stakeholders to communicate direction, but also to ensure the life safety of our employees. And again, to ensure that your business isn't disrupted because of this major event. This is also, it could be very short, a few hours. I'll give you an example. On some days there may be a technology outage. It can happen any day, right? So you may need to coordinate a call if it's impacting customers. But again, depending on the type of work that an organization that you're in, this crisis management will be a little bit different, but it could be very long lasting. The pandemic, for example, when I was at the Fed, I had to deal with the coin impact because everyone was staying at home. Nobody was using, coins. They weren't going to laundromats. They weren't parking. They weren't spending. So the U.S. government actually faced what was mislabeled as a coin shortage. There wasn't a coin shortage. There was a coin circulation issue. So part of my role at the Fed was the crisis management on how do we communicate and work with the bank to get coin moving. The last pillar, this is something that I work very closely with our TPRM group, our vendor risk management group on, is broader risk management, anything that relates to regulatory compliance, but also it's helping, if you're in a regulated industry, helping your company go through the regulatory scrutiny. Right. This is very quick, just a baseline for all of you. The BCM lifecycle, this applies to all four pillars, right? Whether it's disaster recovery or business continuity. Usually in the beginning of the year, you want to assess and evaluate your risk, look at likelihood and impacts, look at scenarios. And then the second phase of planning is coming up with your business continuity plans. Uh, in the technology realm, it's the disaster recovery plans. That's generally how we refer it to. Once you have those plans, you do the validation. And this is where what I was talking about, the testing uh, is focused on. And in the next couple of slides, I'll actually walk us through some of our testing that we do at the bank. And then from those testing, you do learn different lessons and identify any issues. So you may have seen this chart if you're in IT, advanced audit, because this is a very a common framework here on how we look at the different components for disaster recovery. And again, some of these terms may be a little bit different based on your industry and company, but it's all the same thing. It's really looking at when the disaster occurs, when is there an outage to the application or system that you're dealing with, and you want to figure out when can you get it back up and running. So that's the RTO. And then there's a second related measure is, okay, what is the longest time that if you can't make it when you expect to recover, when is the longest? It could be it's called maximum tolerable downtime. Sometimes it's called maximum allowable downtime. Recently, I know we changed it to MTPD, which I always struggle to remember. Maximum tolerable period of disruption. So they're all the same. And then going backwards, if your application deals with data, you will want to look at the RPO, whether you're able to recover the application. So say you're working on an application that requires real-time data, that RPO may be shorter. So it means you need to be able to recover the data maybe from an hour ago. However, if you're working on a system that relies on historic information, it's not that important. You could, it's fine if you lose the data for a week or more because you're really looking at data that's 6 months ago or more, then that time frame can go longer. But this chart is always handy when you're considering DR testing and what they are measuring. I list out some of the scenarios that you might want to test as a company, but none of the scenarios are really that important because this is just the context, right? What is important is that the application or system is down, and now you need to recover it. Okay. I want to talk about the DR testing components, what we measure. We talked about the RTO already, how quickly it needs to be brought up, RPO. Those two obviously are key. When you're auditing, you want to make sure that your business continuity programs, have at minimum these two, right? And then based on your company or organization, there may be other criteria. Some things to think about, and this is fresh on my mind because it's something that I'm working on as well, which is ensuring that we look at the application's impact to business functionality. So sometimes your test isn't, it is about the application, but you need to consider it in the broader context of, okay, what is really the impact going to be? So you need to consider the functionality of your application or system that's in question. One thing to consider is also the complexity of your testing. So what does it mean, the DR test? So I had the other day I was working with some business units and they asked me, well, what do you mean by end-to-end? I come from another company and end-to-end means, the entire division is involved. Well, I have to explain to them, well, at this company, end-to-end is really, focus on the application. It means our IT is involved, with the failover. Uh, and then the business is also involved because they need a test to make sure that, the application works in the DR environment. So, again, a lot of these definitions are um, subjective, but your role as an auditor, and I deal with a lot of auditors, is to look at what the program has defined and kind of benchmark against that. So if I'm saying, if I'm being audited by one of you, and I'm saying, well, our DR tests, we only need the IT teams involved. So you need to make sure that when I have my documentation, that you can verify that, because I didn't say the business needs to be involved. But if I mention in my policies and my standard that I have that, then you need to check against it because a lot of it is looking at the definition. So these are the consideration, the complexity. Some of the other more complex DR tests, functional base with multiple applications. Sometimes there may be instances where you want to test not only one application, but all the other application that particular application touches upon. So you want to look at the dependencies, upstream and downstream, middleware, API, etc. On the right side, I list out the components and requirements. So what do I do for DR testing? One of the first thing we do is we look at the critical application status and tiering. So this is not just owned by the business continuity team, but by the business users and other stakeholders who have a say in, this system is going to be critical. And again, the tiering system will be unique to your organization. At my workplace, it's generally tier 1 through 4. So tier 1 means it's the most important. It has to be up and running within 4 hours. So when we do a DR test, it has to be recovered within 4 hours for the business to test. If it exceeds that time, we will have to fail the test because we weren't able to successfully get it back up, within 4 hours. Tier 2 is 24 hours. And again, specific to our program, we test the tier 1 and tier 2. Other companies, again, may have very different requirements. You want to consider data replication and backup. Does the application have an RPO to test? I will say that there are a lot of applications that actually do not store data, but it's still important. So we still test it, but there's actually no RPO. So it's important to document that. And that's one of the things actually, just to share as a real life example is in the past, we've had some reports in my experience where we have the RPO field listed in our DR test report, but that DR test for the application did not have RPO. But when you leave it blank, we get in trouble because you're saying that you didn't test the RPO. Well, it's very important for you to identify that in the scope. Obviously, infrastructure architecture, a lot of times when it's cloud hosted, increasingly we are seeing across every industry more applications hosted in the cloud. Well, what does that mean? Every company will be a little bit different. Is it kind of public cloud? Is it really with someone, with a vendor? And how do you test that? There's another component that I didn't mention here, which is the third-party testing. This, group of applications would be fully hosted with your vendor. So again, the organization may decide that it's low risk. Some organization may say, oh, we want to see if we can test this. So you can work with your vendor to test it. During the DR test, you want to collect the DR plans. these are the steps for IT to execute the failover. And then the business functional validation. So this is the business where they identify what are they going to test. IT have successfully failed over the application to the disaster recovery environment. The business now need to use the application to confirm that it is actually working. So maybe an example is they might look up a record that they normally will and say, okay, yes, I can be able to search this customer's information. It's the same as it is in the production environment. But this is up to the business. So those are the two components, the DR plans, the tech recovery runbook, and the functional validation playbooks. A big part of business continuity is just communicating before, during, and after the DR test. In the next slide, I have a flow chart to show how that's done. And then, of course, a critical component that we have strictly, for audit purposes and risk management purposes, the post-test documentation. This is these are the artifacts that auditors will most likely look at. Our after action report. After every test, we have the test report. We document the issues, who participated, when did this occur, any action items identified, and then how do you track it? And then, of course, like the criteria for success, what was the RTO, what was the RPO? Those are usually captured in the after action report. I'll try to share an example of that briefly if we have time. I think this one of my last slides here, the planning flow, how I normally plan our end-to-end DR testing. Initially, you want to determine the scope. We just follow our policy. But again, this is organizational dependent. Your company may say we will only test, our most critical, those that will have impact, customer impacts, and half of our departments, rely on them, and that's the scope, right? At my in our program, we do anything that needs to be recovered within 4 hours, tier 1 or tier 2, within 24 hours. So that's the scope. You identify and engage the DR test participants. So this starts with seeing who's responsible for this, who owns this on the IT side, and then the key business user who will be testing that. Work with IT team to generate the IT runbook. They need to review their recovery plan to make sure it's updated. The business will need to do the same thing. Now, as you get closer to the test, you want to determine and confirm the DR test date, confirming the resources available. Believe it or not, this is a very crucial step. It's very simple, but a lot of companies actually have to cancel DR tests in the middle of it sometimes because they don't have the right resources. So one of the things I always do is as soon as I have the test date, I send the invite. I also confirm multiple times with everyone on their availability. And then the last steps prior to the test is to coordinate and facilitate any DR tests, prep calls. Right before this call here, I was actually working with our Hong Kong team, doing some prep work for an upcoming DR test. And then you conduct the DR tests on the day that you set, and then the post-test documentation and any issues and follow-up. So that's sort of the overview of disaster recovery testing. let me see if there's any questions. Amanda, would it be helpful to look at one of the run books, or do you think this is sufficient before we go to Q&A? Because I want to be mindful of time.
I'm open.
Okay. Let me pull it up. And again, this is um, just to share as an example. Okay. Here you see one of our critical applications. It's called Argo. This is what a lot of our frontline folks will use in their um, interactions with client, account openings. So this is quite critical. Here, this is specific to my company, right? So we follow the guidelines of FFIEC. So we have to list out some of our assumptions and what we are trying to get out of these plans. We have all the critical information here. Where is it hosted, etc. Who's the owner, right? And then, who's going to be a part of the recovery team? Again, this is IT. And again, every plan is different, but we need to, it's the same, right? Whether it's a cyber attack, natural disaster, if this application is down, your step is going to be the same. But these are the possible scenarios, likely scenarios for any application to go down. And then I don't, I'm not an expert in all these tech steps, but our IT team has put together all the sort of information. And again, I'm just showing this so you can get an idea of what is in a disaster recovery plan. And then you have contact information, etc. Okay, so that's an example. So that's what's being tested, right? So the flow chart that I went through so if we're doing this test with Argo, I would contact everyone listed in that plan. I would show the different steps, we confirm it. And then here is a DR test report. Again, this is very generic. It's very similar to many companies. What you want to do here is identify the applications being tested, who participated. So my name is here because I was leading it. What type of tests? This is the type of information we capture, and then all the evidence, and then the action items, and then how quickly the failover happened, whether it passed and met the scope. So as an auditor, you're trying to test against what I'm saying here. So I said that it passed and it met the test scope. Well, you're going to have to dig through to see if it is. So anyway, this is just a quick example of the DR test. I'm going to close with one more slide here before I open it up for questions. So if any of you are interested in business continuity, disaster recovery, how do you prepare for that? Well, I think being in your program and in this class, that's obviously very helpful. I've identified some skills that I think would be beneficial in sort of the resiliency type of role, whether it's disaster recovery, it's more technical focus, versus business continuity, more generalized. My background is probably more on the business continuity side. However, I do a lot of disaster recovery, and I certainly have learned a lot over the years. I don't have the technical background, but I know what type of questions to ask, and I know who to get the answers from. So a lot of the work is strategic planning, project management, and relationship building and communications. Some of the areas of expertise that are always helpful in terms of background, we see a lot of people in emergency management. Facility is great if you're working for a company with a large footprint. For example, I have a friend who works for Starbucks Business Continuity, and they were actually doing real estate and facilities before getting into it. But they were really good for that role because they knew all the risk associated with the different facilities. And okay, this region will have a lot of snow, this other region has a lot of risk for crime, etc. And of course, IT and tech background, I think a lot of you may have that background. Various credentials, industry certification I've listed here. With that, I'll open it up for any question and discussions.
Thank you, Steve. So go ahead. I will let you guys raise your question, or you can put it in the chat.
Question. For your flow chart, the 8-step for the DR plan testing, which step do you think would be most time intensive? And is there any way to mitigate that or at least make sure it goes at a healthy speed?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I think the most time sensitive one is actually right before the test when you're confirming if there are any issues, because you can remind people, you can ask people to review their plans, update their plans. But the truth is, everyone, they have their own day job. They're not here to do the DR test. It's a hassle for them, right? So that generally is the most time sensitive, because there's always something that sort of goes wrong very close to the DR test. Last year, I had a test that was almost canceled the night before because one of the person we thought could perform a task actually wasn't a SME for that task, and there were only two other people who could do it. One was away on vacation, and the other one had a commitment. So, there was a lot of political management that I had to deal with, getting a couple levels of my management involved to say, hey, can you assign someone? We know this is really bad, but if we cancel this, it means all the other people who were prepared, they have to reschedule. And we were working with a very tight deadline. So it was sort of, either 28 other people had to reschedule or we try to get that one person. So I think resource confirmation, that's probably most time sensitive. I see a couple of questions. Let me take a look. So let's go to the first one, Feng Xiao. I was wondering if you would be able to share any examples where you encounter obstacles with enacting the BC and DR plan. Yeah, I do. So in general, I do think that it's one thing to have something on your DC plan or DR plan, and a total different thing when the actual disaster or event occurs. So this actually underpins why it is important to do the testing and to really validate your issue. So I don't have a specific example, but I can tell you there's a lot of times when something happens, we need to recover an application, and we pull up the DR plan. The IT team is executing it, and then they realize, oh, well, one of the steps was misordered, or one of the steps wasn't updated, whether it's the server name or kind of database configuration. So yeah, we get that a lot. So my recommendation is from the audit perspective and from the control perspective, it's very important to validate that. So whether you do that in a more formal DR testing where you say, here's the RTO, proof that you can actually fail over, or encourage business units to do tabletop exercises. So I would recommend that. Andrew mentioned 2025 saw a ton of cloud outages, correct? AWS, Azure, Cloudflare, Google. Yep. Were we affected and how we change our approach to business continuity? So I'm gonna refrain from speaking specifically, on impacts directly to our company, just because I think that's always best practice. But it's safe to say that a lot of financial institutions, a lot of companies like ours did get impacted, by one of these outages in different ways, right? So sometimes it is due to uh, how you are set up with that vendor. And again, I'll speak at a very high level. So, for instance, I understand that the AWS outage occurred, for one of their clusters on the East Coast. So, if you were a company that actually were relying on that cluster, that would have impacted you. If you weren't, you were not. So it really depends on the specifics of what was causing that outage for some of these cloud providers. But in general, I do see a move from a lot of senior management across the industry, not just at our company and other financial institution. This move to really question the resiliency of cloud partners. So yeah, it has changed how we interact. I could see a lot of pressure in terms of evaluating the risk with our vendor partnerships. The other thing I'll mention, too, is perhaps a diversification of your vendors. So there is a focus on reducing the concentration, but it is very difficult. So for the financial industry, as an example, there's only 2 or 3 providers, that provide the type of core banking services that 99% of banks will use. So the options are limited, and I know that sometimes companies are always pushing to to challenge and to really scrutinize the risk. But right now, there's not a whole lot that I think we can do in terms of those type of vendors.
Hi, Stan Arden here. Question kind of going on that vein that about cloud storage and using cloud services. I've gone through a lot of audits per se in where I work, and every time we get audited, we get a lot of questions on kind of like what is the disaster, what is the contingency plan for our cloud applications. And I find it that every time each vendor will ask for something different. What do you kind of recommend to have on hand as kind of like almost like that they're going to ask for this kind of paperwork instead of having to scramble and try to talk to the cloud provider about the application and what their plan is and stuff like that?
Yeah, are you talking about your clients asking your products and then you rely on
The other way
vendors?
around. We're the client and we're being audited and we're using cloud services to
Yeah.
host our applications.
Yeah. So I would say Amanda's quite the SME on this, right? Because part of this is with the broader vendor management program at your company. Business continuity should play a key role in looking at the documentation, the resiliency structure, and setup that the vendors provide to you, right? So looking at their test documentation, looking at their SOC reports, it's very hard to get transparency in this area because I see similar challenges. Again, a lot of these players, they're so big that they can get away with a lot of uh, they're able to assure a lot of customers by just saying, we are AWS or Microsoft. But on the other side, they do engage with a number of third-party auditors that look at their program and they are able to certify. So I would say if you're having trouble getting transparency from them, that looking at third-party reports, that's something that I do a lot. Is I look at the SOC 2 reports that these vendors will provide. If they're not able to provide something directly to me, or if I'm not satisfied, looking at their SOC, if they're ISO certified, I think that provides assurance in a lot of ways as well. And if they're meeting other standards that would be consistent with your industry. I don't know which industry you're in, but for example, if they're meeting certain financial resiliency, I know I know that they will have similar control as us. So, for example, if one of our vendors is a financial institution, we know they're held to certain standards. So maybe we don't need every single document, and we just need to review a minimum document for that assurance. There's also a move right now. In that I learned from a meeting with Microsoft recently that a lot of these bigger companies, they actually employ a third party to write very detailed review, and it's a little bit different than your usual due diligence documents, but they write a report, and I think they do it because Microsoft won't have to pay them, so there's no conflict of interest. But if you're trying to look at that report, you pay the auditor that is conducting the audit.
Right. Very good. Thank you.
All right. Let me see if there's I have a question on AI, Angela. Okay. The role of AI and how it's reshaping business continuity. Like many functional areas, I do think there's a lot of potential here to reshape, to simplify, and really help. So everything from idea generation, generating ideas. I know that a lot of BC teams are using that. So I know that AI has great potential for that. You can ask AI and these LLMs to write entire business continuity plans. Now, it's going to be very generic, but it's a starting point. So I think right now, the contribution to the BC area resiliency area would probably be more at elementary baseline. It's a starting point, but you will still have to fix it up. But it's getting a lot better. And I think you still can't replace some of the in-person intervention and interactions, whether it's determining the tiering of an application, right? Or determining if the workaround is actually sufficient. It could give you ideas on workarounds and strategies for recovery, but you would have to then decide. So I would say it's going to help a lot. I can see a big difference even within the last year. I actually encourage some of our businesses to really Google different ideas when they're coming up with one. So I think there's really no excuse anymore because there's a lot of resources out there. It may not give you the right answer, but it will give you the directions to get that right answer. And you don't have to have an AI app, right? Because like even if you type into something Google now, I think it automatically uses AI to generate answers for you.
Okay, one last question. Anybody want to ask Stephen? Or I can ask.
I
Anybody?
have one last
Go ahead.
question real
Thank
quick.
you.
So I know when you talked about, when you go through the kind of the disaster recovery, you talk about tiering, tiering the applications, tiering what you need to bring back and all that. And, I have to do that with, working in government. I have to go through all the departments and the divisions. And one thing I always find difficult is when you ask everybody, everybody tells you that their application is number one and it should all be their first one that comes back. Nobody wants to say their application is really not top tier. How how do you determine, or how do you kind of navigate that to be able to tell someone, well, look, I understand, your application or your service you think is number one, but it should be a tier two, tier four, it should be at the bottom. It's not necessarily the number one that we're going to bring back,
Yeah.
beside like finance and stuff like that. How do you recommend, or how do you deal with that
Thank
piece?
you for that very real life question because that's something I deal with constantly, and I'm sure a lot of you as well. So you actually have this issue both ways, depending on the leadership and where they push people. But I would say in order for you to, so first of all, yes, I agree with you. A lot of people think that their business process is the most important or the application is most important. But you have to really determine, well, what is the customer impact? What's the financial impact? So coming up with those methodology to determine that. In our business continuity program, we do that by asking people to rate the potential impact in terms of the financial, operational, reputational, legal, and compliance. If this application is down, when will it, rise to the attention of our CEO, for example, right? So even though you think it's very important, but you think, oh, well, we could go for 2 weeks, before, it really get escalated, then you're not really a tier one. You really don't have to be up in one day. But then compared to an actual critical application like wire transfer, for instance, the technology around that, I can't think of any bank that can go without their wire processing technology for more than a day. Their CEO will definitely hear about it. So on the flip side, Stanley, there's also this idea of people underranking. So if your leadership thinks, well, everything should be, this is very important, why are they putting as a non-critical application? That could also be equally as a problematic because if everything is important, nothing's going to be important. So I would say come up with the criteria on how you define tier one, tier two, stick with that. At Facebook, um, there was a short questionnaire that people filled out, and it was yes, no, and then ranking, and it spits out a recovery time objective for the business process. And unless you have very good reason, you can't override it. If you want to override it, you need to explain why, and it require management approval. So I think that's how you get around with it. You set clear standards for your tiering and criticality. Yeah, that's sort of the way to go there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so
Okay.
thank you so much, Stephen. This is
Yeah.
extremely helpful. So please give Stephen a round of applause. Thank you so much. Appreciate you taking the time and sharing your experience, the detail on BCM, the process, the testing, the sample, DR plan, how it looks like. So thank you. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
No, as always, thank you for inviting me, and it was a pleasure talking to all of you. Good luck with the rest of the class. I know Amanda is one of the best professors, so thank you again.
Okay, thank you. Have a good
Bye.
night.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, so let me go back. Are there any questions before we kind of dive into like a little bit about tonight's topic? Sharing.
I have a question regarding the sample program. So
Yes.
I know you said they're available inside of those chapter slides that you
Mhm.
posted on Canvas,
Mhm.
but we can't open anything in the PDF for some reason. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or
The for the one that you will be really looking at, I posted individually. So I posted the sample AI, business continuity plan, IAM, cloud computing. So those are all in Canvas by itself, not inside the chapter.
gotcha. Because I'm trying to open the ISACA Microsoft Excel worksheet in chapter 1 slide, and it doesn't seem to open. I don't know. I don't know if we're
Uh,
supposed to have access to that or.
yeah, like I said, like in chapter 1, all those sample audit program, I pull it out and post it individually.
Oh,
So
okay.
you should see it. Uh-huh.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so kind of very good question about I think Stanley or somebody asking about like, for the more and more company moving over to cloud, and obviously you never thought like cloud provider the system will be down because the way they structure the cloud is multi-region, multi zone, right? So in general, it should not be down because the way they set it up, but obviously it's never, there's always possibility, and it demonstrated that possibility last year. AWS was down for like what, a day or two. Microsoft is a whole day. Google, Salesforce. So those are major cloud provider. So as you can see that if you talk about telecommunication, right, a lot of time you see like organization have like primary data center and the backup data center. So there are two different data center running active, and they have two different telecommunication vendors. So like one goes down, the other one pick it up. So there's always like redundancy built in. So with the cloud, because the cost, think about like if you need to have a different cloud provider as like a backup, that is going to be really costly. So some of the things that I see vendor do that when they use cloud environment hosting on the cloud environment is you just have to step up to do more rigorous monitoring, more rigorous testing. You can kind of like identify maybe within the product services that you have hosted on the cloud, which one is the most critical. Is there a manual workaround, a temporary solution? You need to make sure like your business continuity plan is up to speed and be able to you can execute that plan when there's a disaster like what we're seeing last year. But it's just based on the structure, the cost. It's just very unlikely that you can have two different cloud providers running the same thing simultaneously, like we see in the production data center and the backup data center. But again, same thing, depending on the impact and the likelihood and your risk tolerance, maybe certain critical function like your API solution where it's have a significant impact on multiple business unit, multiple area. Maybe that's one area where you can build in redundancy, where if you're running on the Microsoft, maybe you have somehow a backup on the AWS with like some type of synchronization, between those two cloud provider. So again, it is everybody's trying to step up and be up their whole BCP process and plan to manage in the event the cloud provider having outages. What else? Somebody else is asking another question. Oh, and then another person asking about like the tier, right? The tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, things like that. A lot of times, like Steven say, from the program perspective, you have to set up your methodology to define how you do the assessment. So they call BIA, Business Impact Assessment. So within your methodology, you have to kind of define, okay, sounds like what Steven's saying is that some BCM program define their business impact assessment based on different risk category, financial risk, reputational risk, technology risk, resilient risk, etc. And then within each of those category, you have to define what is the impact and what's the likelihood, right? I think we kind of walked through the other day on the risk assessment, where when you look at risk assessment, you look at the impact and the likelihood, right? High impact, most certain what happened, that's your highest risk, versus low impact, most likely not happening. Those are very low risk, so you probably don't even need to worry too much. So those are how you kind of help define tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 based on clear definition of business impact assessment and the definition of what's impact, and within the impact you define um you know high, medium, low, or high, elevated, moderate, low, minimal, depending on how you define it, and then the likelihood. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay, so let's go through this one very quick. Like we talk about scope. Even Steven said earlier, remember when he talked about like when you conduct the BCDR testing, the very first one, the first step you need to do is that you define your scope. What is your scope? What is your scope of testing, right? So scope is very important. Like we talk about audit. When you do audit, you have to define scope. Otherwise, it's too broad. Okay. So obviously within like, depending on the type of business, depending on the type of audit you will be conducting, if you're conducting the PCI DSS, right, to make sure that you comply with the PCI in the event that your organization store, process, transmit the full credit card number. So even within PCI DSS, there's different scope. It could be including just looking at the cardholder data, IT system supporting the PCI, the software it used, the infrastructure, the personnel, the whole end-to-end process. So you could define your PCI DSS scope. Are you doing all of them? Are you doing just like the cardholder data? So you can define the scope. Again, this is why we talk about why we need to define the scope. And here are some of the things that once you have your scope defined, you need to make sure that you're managing it, right? You want to make sure that you don't add additional requirement to your scope. Or if there is absolutely needed, you have to go through a change management process. So scope is very important. Things that to look out for, again, I said earlier, make sure that it's not too narrow. You want to make sure that your scope is comprehensive enough. So let's take a look at a couple of the scope. So for example, if you're conducting the information security audit, one of the scoping is that, so the objective is to conduct the audit, right? But the scope of the audit could say, hey, the audit will cover in the following key area. So I will be covering from the information security perspective, the governance and risk management. So inside the governance and risk management, I'm going to review the information security governance structure, roles and responsibility, defining whether there's an IT steering committee, defining, the getting the org chart from the IT, etc. So review the information security governance structure, evaluate the risk management processes, including risk identification, risk analysis, assessment, mitigation strategy. So my scope will include to see is there risk assessment process in place. Within that process, it helped identify the risk, right? And then assess the organization's information security policy and procedure. So that's it. So my scope would be so narrow to looking at just governance and risk management. Okay. Or I think there's additional. This is the information security audit could be focused on just the identity access management. So here I'm saying that for access control, I will be looking at the access control policy, the user authentication, authorization, privilege access management, how to managing the privileged account, like system admin account, review of user access review process, the termination process. So this is like access control, or asset management. Like, is there a policy and procedure in place to track IT inventory? Is there IT access management software in place? Is there a process in place to identify inventory, etc.? So this is all like very specific scope within different type of information security area. Okay. So here is the physical and environmental security. So this is the scope of the audit. We'll be looking at the physical security measures such as access to the building, the data center, server room. Review the environmental control, including the monitoring, temperature, disaster recovery measure of the facility, the data center, or the server room. So this is, again, very specific scope. You need to be clear. You need to call it out. The network security audit scope could include assessment of the network security control, like looking at the firewall, the IDS, IPS, or the network configuration. So again, here it would be reviewing the type of network security policy they have in place. Do they have a firewall standard that to help define or configure the firewall? What type of IDS, IPS tool they use? What type of configuration is set up? So those are all specific to network. So that's your scope. Your scope of the audit will include reviewing those network security, firewall, etc. A review of the secure network configuration and vulnerability. So network security audit, we're also including looking at the network configuration, the vulnerability, how they do scan, how they do the timeline on how quickly they can remediate the vulnerability, etc. So this is all under network security audit. Okay. So if you're doing like system or application security audit, then you will be looking at the system hardening standard, looking at the security of critical application, right? Patch management, vulnerability scanning specific to those application. And then there's also incident response and business continuity. So again, Stephen already shared with you guys a lot of great example on, how to conduct uh, the 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 business continuity review, and what different type of uh, you know pillar within the business continuity management. So again, very clearly defined scope when you conduct audit. When you guys doing your audit, when you submit the report, there's one section called the entry letter, right? The inside the entry letter, that is something that you want to define your scope in there too. So you define the scope to let your auditee know that where are you performing the audit and where. right? You could be doing an audit of the system and application security review of the newly implemented online ticketing system. So your scope will be specific to the application security of that ticketing system. Okay, so make sure that scoping is clear and is, not too narrow, but at the same time put barrier around it. Okay, there's also data protection, privacy, third-party risk management. The scope of the work when you conduct audit can also focus more on training and awareness. When you conduct the information security audit, as you can see, there's so many different domain or component. Each of the component has its own like scope. So when you conduct the audit, you can pick multiple area and then define very clearly the scope within each of those area. Okay. Any question? So pretty straightforward scope. You just need to remember you have to define scope clearly and define it upfront during your audit. Governance. Okay. So why governance is important and why are we auditing governance? The reason why a governance is very important is because we want to make sure that there's a structure in place, right? We want to make sure that there is a governance process in place. There is the senior management oversight. There's proper policy and procedure, right? There's proper budgeting, planning. All those are governance. So we want to make sure that there's a good IT governance in place because most of the framework always started out with is there governance framework in place? Is there policy and procedure in place? I think we talk about maybe it's in the last class, we talk about like, from the audit perspective, a lot of time we're auditing against the policy and procedure. So people can tell you, they do this, but without a documented policy or standard, you cannot hold people accountable for those, right? So that's the reason why it's very important to have IT governance and making sure that most of the time when we do audit, we started out with like looking to see if the governance function is in place and is operating effectively. Okay, so the very differences between tactic, strategy, and logistic. Tactic is very short time. You're managing or resolving something, versus a strategy is a long term, right? You have multiple activity, multiple initiative to support to meet your strategy goal, and then tactic is just like how to get it done, and then logistic is the coordination of the resources. Okay, so again, this is just like different framework. Here's the link or the website. Feel free to take a look at those framework. I think that we talk about NIST cybersecurity framework, very well known. A lot of organization out there from the information security perspective, they uh, they they define or they design their security policy process around the NIST cybersecurity framework. COBIT is the ISACA COBIT. So we talk about, ISACA is an international organization and it's well known. Within the COBIT, there's like 34 different IT processes, and each of the processes, there's detailed activities that each of those processes will be entailing within IT. So COBIT is think about it as like a very comprehensive IT library. HITRUST here again is more focused on the cybersecurity, information security related. So this is another. I think I see like some of those like government, agency that kind of use HITRUST as one of the cybersecurity framework. ITEL So again, if you're international and you want to make sure that your, the framework can be, trusted or can be rely on with different countries' law and regulation, a lot of time you start out with ITEL framework and then you map the local uh, regulation requirement to the ITEL. And here's some of the comparison. Okay, so I think that last class we kind of went through the AWS SOC report. So SOC report is like SOC 1 is focused on financial record. SOC 2 is focused more on the security. So, but SOC 1 and SOC 2 are all independent third-party report. And PCI DSS, we talk about if your payment card, your processing store, or transmit full payment card data, you need to be PCI DSS compliant. And then we talk about ISO. So this is, again, a different security framework. And then here's here's the Cal Poly one. So again, feel free when you have a chance, take a look at the IT, Cal Poly's IT governance policy procedure framework. I think that some of this you will need to review during your group project. Okay, because this is there's a lot of good information security policy and standard that Cal Poly has established. Okay. Any question on governance? Okay. So again, I think we talked about earlier, kind of like focus on, how to communicate to the executive. Okay. So obviously, operational team always say no to security just because when you put in additional security, you slow down the process. And when you talk to some of the, CFO, the finance people, when you talk about securities, adding additional costs. So we just need to be able to communicate to the executive, you know, making sure they understand and aware of the cost when there's a cyber attacks, the reputational cost, the financial cost, the operational disruption, all those things. Um, they need to executive management need to be understand and be able to tie it back to why we putting all those security control in place and then understanding who really decide from the IT security perspective. A lot of time the IT steering committee will be the one who kind of help review and approve the policy, the framework. They are the one who kind of like, also kind of like be the one who help lay out the cost, the resource need, etc. Okay. Again, uh, majority, I wouldn't say all. I say majority of time, uh, IT or information security is there to enable. It's an enabler to business. So business is there to kind of like, for a reason to make money, to, conduct operations. So, most of the time, IT and information security are an enabler to support the business. Okay. So you kind of need to know how to ask, right? How to link the risks to the, reward. How to, by understanding what's the tolerable, like tolerant range within your risk and be able to kind of asking for those questions. Okay. And do your research, understanding who they ask, make sure you obtain an organizational chart. And this is just like kind of by understanding when what to how to ask, who to ask to for information security related type of audit, and when there's a finding, how do you communicate that? Yeah. So this is just some of the information that I will leave it for you guys to kind of feel free to be. Okay. So this is just like some of the example questions on, what to ask. Okay. Yeah. So remember, when you're explaining the finding, the reason why we're doing it, things like that. What is the risk? Make sure like you can break it down to like executive level. Like don't go into too technical. Make it explain it on a higher level so that they can understand from their level what is the risk. Okay. So again, talk, you know, listen, doing your homework, understanding the how to map the risk to the organization's risk. That will help. Okay, any question there? Okay, so again, now that we know how to communicate our finding, our report to the executive, now we need to see how when we conduct the audit, how do we gather information from the technical people, right? Um, Obviously, we understand the differences between information security versus IT. IT is more infrastructure, making sure that for the IT operations, keeping the light on, making sure that everything's function versus information security, focus more from the security perspective, making sure that, there's no vulnerability, there's proper access control, making sure that, there's no virus coming in, so etc. So it's more from the security lens. So here is a couple of the differences between security and IT. IT implement run the firewall versus security a lot of time would be reviewing the firewall rule and making sure that, hey, yep, so information security will be set up the standard on the firewall rule and IT will implement that. Security will be reviewing it and respond to the IDS alert, right? But the system itself, the implementation of the IDS system and making sure that the system is running, that's IT. So IT will implement and run the system, but the end result, the alert itself is information security. A lot of time information security will be the one who run this vulnerability scan, and then once they're done with the scanning, they send over to IT to fix it because a lot of time IT own those like server, the router, etc. So they're very commingle, I guess, but at the same time they're very distinct uh group with different tasks. Okay, same thing, encryption and policy procedure. So here, a couple of the example, kind of like pay attention to like poor IT hygiene, why we're having so many security incident, data breach, you know, as you can see that, if you're using expire HTTPS certificate, well, and when it expire, the HTTPS is no longer working, so information will be transmitting through clear text. So that is going to be a add-in vulnerability. If you have the terminated local user account still enabled, so somebody can hijack that account. So etc. So this is just a listing of things that look out for. Especially when we conduct audit of IT, those are the things that we want to see. Hey, the IT has, are there any expired HTTPS certificates still used by IT? Are there any missing patches that IT did not implement? Things like that. Those are the things that we look out for when we conduct the audit. Don't over argue with the technical people, they're always right. So you have to figure out how to ask questions. Working with other security pro. Okay. So building this people who build the security, who conduct the testing. So those are different uh example of the role. And then the responder. Okay. Any question? So this is more going to just like, talking to IT, talking to InfoSec, making sure that we see the clear differences, the roles and responsibilities. So when we conduct the audit, we can differentiate them. And then lastly, of course, is the user, right? So user, we talk about a lot of time business is like managing the generating the revenue. And a lot of time IT will be the enabler. So when we conduct the audit, when we select the IT, a business function, a business system, we conduct the audit. How do we talk to the user to make sure that we get what we need? Right. Uh, Again, this is just like you you, you know with the whole the like Steven said earlier, the complexity of all the different system commingled together, end user, of course, the user of the system, the backend, um, you know, they probably gonna rely on the technical IT resource to provide those information. So it's kind of combination when you do an audit. You have to talk to the business user and you also need to talk to the technical IT. Okay. So sometimes the user, they are just, you know, focus on what they can explain what they do, but sometimes like they might not understand the whole audit process, may not understand the purpose of why you're asking certain information. So sometimes it's good. That's why I say scoping is important. You have to communicate the scoping upfront so that they understand why you're doing the audit, what is the scope of your audit, and who you will be needing to talk to, what type of information you need. So things like that. So those are some of the challenge. Just keep that in mind when you conduct your audit from the end user perspective. Um, so things that kind of help ease that, you know, uh, breach the how you're gathering the data from the end user. So those are some of the things that you can, you know, leverage, I guess. So, any questions? I go through it very quick. Again, feel free to take a look at it. If you have questions, we can allocate some time next class to kind of answer those questions. But for now, if you have any, I'm going to stay after the class for students who have questions about their individual audit project or the group project. Don't wait until the end. I would say start getting slowly working on it, because if you wait until the last week to do your before the on the for the due date, if you wait for 1 week for the due date to start working on it, you're not gonna have a good experience. Okay. Any question?
Professor,
Uh-huh.
I know you said the audit programs were on Canvas, which they are. But are we supposed to have access to the ISACA Excel sheet though? Because I don't see it on Canvas.
Yeah, ISACA Excel spreadsheet is only needed if you're doing your group project and your group project is on the ISACA framework. So remember the group project for information security. I think group 1, 2, and 3 are using ISACA audit framework, and then group 4 and 5 will be using NIST. So for the ISACA framework, I think those are all free to be able to download from ISACA, and as a student, it's also free for the student to be a ISACA member. So if you guys need to get the audit program, I would say like just like sign up and become an ISACA member, and it's complimentary.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm gonna have to do that then, because yeah, I'm part of group 1. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, yeah, so thank you.
Uh-huh.
Professor, I have a question.
Sure.
So same thing for the individual. For the generative AI, can we use an Exaka program for
Of
that?
course, of
Okay.
course. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. If there's no other question, for the student have no questions, feel free to drop off. Have a good night. For the student have additional questions, please stay. We can continue.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you. Have a good
Good
night.
night. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Professor.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Professor.
Uh-huh.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, were the lectures supposed to be recorded? Because I know last time we did record the lecture, but this time we didn't. So I just wanted to like double check if we were
Yeah.
supposed to or not.
Yeah. Well, the last class, I think it didn't finish saving it. So this time, but you know, the all the material gonna be posted in Canvas, so they can go through the material and ask me questions during the class.
Awesome, I see. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.